Putin's grand plan to circumvent the US dollar and conduct international business in some other currency seems to be dead in the water. Just who killed it and what sort of half-baked schemes is Putin going to try now to finally be able to import something into his failing economy? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay. So this is one of those stories that we've sort of gradually been watching over the course of this conflict, and that has been Putin's efforts to build a de-dollarization among trading partners, among the global south. And this is a bigger deal than you might think, because right now, if two countries or even two large multinational corporations want to pay each other, they generally use the US dollar. And that just makes a lot of sense, right? Because how could you trust someone to have a reliable transaction when they can print their own money, right? Imagine if you had to sell, let's say, a gallon of milk to your neighbor, but they could only pay you in neighbor bucks, and you had to accept your payment. You could only offer him to purchase his things in your own bucks. If I had to offer you like Paul bucks that I printed off of my printer, right? It would be almost impossible. And that's the problem with countries sort of trying to do transactions in their own currency, is that it's seen as an unreliable way. In addition to the fact that a lot of currencies are unstable, a lot of markets' exchange rates are kind of tough to price. Again, what's the exchange rate in the Ugandan, dollar for, Saudi dinar? No, it's not really clearly established because that transaction barely happens. But everybody knows what a Saudi dinar is in the USD, and everybody knows what a Ugandan dollar is to USD. So it's just a logical meeting point. Plus, it helps that it's backed by the largest and most stable economy in the world, with some of the lowest inflation rates in the developed world. So, right, the dollar is a logical choice for international transactions. But there's a problem. The problem is if the United States says, listen, we don't like what you're doing, and in the case of Putin invading his neighbor to forcibly change boundaries unprovoked, well, the U.S. said, you don't get to use our toys if you aren't going to play by at least a baseline set of rules. And so they said, Putin, you're cut off. Well, Putin has been trying to create the BRICS. And the BRICS is a group of emerging economies that said, we're going to come up with our own dollar, and it's going to be even cooler than yours. But in practice, they've had quite a time of it. And recently, the project got what is probably a fatal blow. That is the withdrawal of India. India's confirmed that it's not going to do any of this de-dollarization nonsense. India's made it clear it has no plans to end its use of the US dollar and will use the currency for trade and transactions where it remains a necessary form of payment. Now, the BRICS has officially said, to the extent that they officially say anything, that their goal is to pursue de-dollarization narratives around the world. And India, though, is pretty pissed. They're like, no, China and Russia, we don't want to be a part of this de-dollarization nonsense. We have a good relationship with the United States, and the dollar is a great, reliable international currency. We don't want to embark on an experiment, particularly one where Russia and China are at the helm, right? Of course, according to sources, India believes China is using the BRICS and this de-dollarization as a stepping stone to strengthen its dominance around the world. And so if there's one thing you don't want to do, right, it's be someone who China controls financially. Now, before we talk about just what exactly sort of half-baked schemes Putin and Xi are dreaming up to try to revive this nonsense, I wanted to mention that if you feel like you can't get your stuff done, you don't need to come up with your own nonsense pseudo-currency. You might just need a little extra caffeine. That's why I created Strike Gum. 90 milligrams of caffeine in every piece. That's as much as a Red Bull, as much as an Amp Energy in each piece. Plus 0 sugar, so there's no sugar crash. We're made in the USA. We're veteran owned. It's a no-brainer. So check it out on strikegum.com or on Amazon. Just search for Strike Gum. We are the highest rated caffeine gum on Amazon. So that the proof is right there. Anyway, let's talk about the BRICS. All right, what sort of half-baked ideas are the BRICS going to rely on? Well, one, they're going to invent something called the Petroyuan, right? Now, the Petroyuan is it's not clear what it is. It looks like it's some sort of an oil-denominated Chinese currency. And so the problem, of course, is that if you think that if you look at the current standard, right, the US dollar, and it's true, the US dollar does fluctuate in price, inflation rates, right, and we can use CPI as a good proxy for that, right? And we've seen, for example, up to 9% swings in the US dollar in a year, right? But you see that compared to the price of oil, a 9% swing is downright nothing, right? So if you were to back your country's trade in oil, look at the level of chaos you would have to do. Let's say you're a Russian multinational and you want to buy Chinese steel and you ink the deal. Let's say you inked it in May of 2022 when your oil yuan or whatever was $123 a barrel. But then payment wasn't rendered until September. Well, your payment, your price got cut in half. Okay? So compare that to the 10% a year swing, right? If this were to be the US dollar, we would see it go from 123 to about 120 or to about 134, right? A $12 swing instead of what you have here, which is a 50% swing. So this Petroyuan is just not going to offer any country the stability that it's going to need. And who is it backed by? It's backed by Russia and China, right? And we know that China and Russia, Russia's shown that if you're a tiny country, say a small country on Russia's border, Russia will do what it has to coerce you. Literally, if it wants your territory, it's going to take it. They did it to Georgia. They did it twice to Ukraine, and they'll do it to their neighbors, right? And so why would you sign up to have an exchange policy to be backed by a country who literally invades countries they don't like and steals their stuff? Similarly with China. Does China really strike you as a benevolent actor in this? China has territorial claims on at least 5 other major developed nations, right? So why on earth would you choose to hook your wagon to someone who has openly said, our goal is to annex our neighbor's sovereign territory? Guys, if you're a small country, this is a bad deal, right? Again, I'm not saying the U.S. is like morally upstanding, great guys, never did anything wrong, never coerced anybody. But the United States doesn't want to annex small countries' territory, right? It doesn't want these things. And so it is don't get me wrong, the U.S. has done some like regime change military operations, but there's a massive difference between an internationally recognized state and the absolute pariahs that the United States has done operations with, right? Like, was anybody in the international community really wondering, like, oh, they took out the Taliban, am I next? Like, nah, dude, right? They overthrew Saddam in Iraq. Saddam, who literally was invaded his neighbor and was allowed to remain in power. So I don't think the danger is anything great. But don't worry, guys. Putin's got other plans, too. Just brilliant stuff. That's right. He's launching a crypto scheme, right? You thought it was just Jake Paul launching some shit coin? No, we're going to launch Putin coin, all right? Putin coin is going to be backed by the national payment card system of Russia to exchange rubles for cryptocurrencies and international transactions. Now, again, if you thought the barrel of oil was bad, right? Imagine, let's take a look at Ethereum to USD over time, guys. This is just for context. Let's see if we can get this. All right, this is over the last year. This can you give me a chart, Yahoo? Jesus Christ. You ever heard of a fucking 5-year? Get it together, lads. But you can see here that, you know, it's Ethereum currently sitting about $2,400 a pop. And if you back up to July, it was about $1,000 higher. So again, what's that, a 40% swing? And you can see if you back up even further down the chart, right? You could see that just 3 years ago, it was nearly doubled. So you've also got huge volatility problems. Why would you want this? Plus, a lot of countries, whether you like it or not, oh, check this out. And you can see here, Ethereum was at $1,200 just 2 years ago. These are just not stable like the dollar is, right? Again, it was a political absolute nightmare crisis when there were 10% swings in the value of the USD. And you think that's why it's seen as the most stable currency in the world. It's because the US will always defend the value of its dollar. No other currency, and frankly, no other country has the might and the credibility to do so. So when you hear somebody hemming and hawing about de-dollarization, just know that it's probably nonsense. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks to our Kernel tier members like Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, Gaius Martin, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Karis, L90, and Petra Tororu. See you in the next one. Cheers.